Disappointment exists in every series, no matter what, whether it's something you specifically want in your headcanon or just the fact that the writers have to take stories in different directions. This is what we always look at, and it's no different than Beyblade. In Beyblade Metal Fight, specifically for the anime, today's topic is obviously going to be the two somewhat hyped, but also somewhat overshadowed by just mechanics of the story characters in the form of Yu and Tsubasa, as both of these characters were actually extremely prominent in Metal Fusion and very prominent towards Metal Masters, but sadly I think their fall began with each of them going different paths, as sadly Yu's path really did fall off and see him basically go into obscurity in the events of Metal Masters to Metal Fury, and Tsubasa would actually stay extremely relevant up until the end of the show, but he would also lose his prowess as being very strong. As we move into probably the more interesting ways of how it could be handled to give them proper evolutions that would have made it somewhat satisfying for the fans, but also a way to work it in so that the companies in Takara Tokomi and Bandai that do produce the Beyblades here in America allows them to kind of, make the money, but also keep it thematically so the story would be cool. As I have two options today, we'll start with the less fun, but the one that would have made the most sense for a proper evolution for these characters' Beyblades, in the form of option 1 being the VE system. As I would have the VE system effectively be the budget alternative to make these beys that have been around since their first introduction in Metal Fight, the original, actually have their characteristics a little bit updated to make sure that they keep up with the new 4D system beys. Now, looking into both Yu and Tsubasa, basically the VE system story-wise would take place right after the events of Metal Masters, with both Yu and Tsubasa finally going on that training trip that I had talked about that was kind of hinted towards at the end of Metal Masters, as both Yu and Tsubasa would effectively have a trip together, and in towards Metal Fury's first episodes, you would have Yu and Tsubasa having maybe just a small episode together talking about how they finished their trip, and they have decided to change their beys a little bit as Yu and Tsubasa would split ways, as Tsubasa would be recalled, obviously, to the WBBA to help Jinga with the legendary Blader situation. As we would then go ahead and move forward to what this would effectively be for the beys, is it would simply be like the episode that Benkei and Kento focused in with parts, where they would change their different pieces to help their beys maneuver in different battlefields. For both Yu and Tsubasa, this would be very much the same, as both Flame Libra and Earth Eagle would simply have their parts changed out, but having their fusion wheels re-glossed and reworked at since the World Championship would effectively just make them a little bit more refined, and they would be just a little bit nicer looking with newer parts, as this would be their VE or version enhanced variants that would basically serve them for the rest of the series, just being slightly better versions or more refined versions of their original beys. As then this would pretty much culminate with the fact that both Yu and Tsubasa would have beys that would be not necessarily as strong as the legendary bladers, but definitely able to keep up as they're skilled bladers themselves. Now, that's obviously probably the most basic answered way to handle this, but obviously you did not come here for that. You came here for the main event, and we have our second option here, which is obviously going to be the cooler option, as we focus on rewrite and proper evolutions for both beys in order to explain how they got there and how it helps both characters in their development. Easily starting off with Tsubasa, this one is more easy in the sense that it's more plot convenient to explain how this works, but also is a little bit cooler. So obviously Dark Tsubasa's arc would be reaching its conclusion as he'd be taken over in his fight against Excalibur, and as Tsubasa fought the darkness and reached his pinnacle by going back to his past and remembering how he did when his darkness originally surfaced and how he conquered it, it would be time. As Tsubasa would be able to call out to Eagle to launch out its new special move as it burst from the joint special move, it would be time. As when he'd call forth for it to use its new special move, Eagle would be enveloped with its own new power, surfaced from conquering the dark power. But this would have a lasting effect, as finally when the battle concluded and Eagle returned to Tsubasa, something awakened inside of it. A power of conquering the darkness finally allowed Eagle to access even more power. As similar to Meteor El Drago and Lightning El Drago, it was here, as Eagle would envelop the power of Tsubasa, spreading his wings across the world. as Earth Eagle would transcend to World Eagle. Now, obviously, this is just an example of the recolored Earth Eagle, but I do think the colors would fit, as this would be a great segue into the fact that Eagle would envelop its power, reversing itself, eliminating the purple elements from it, embracing the power of the Earth in terms of the world, changing to orange, and then embracing that power of purple into, obviously, its face bolt, remembering that it's conquered the darkness of Tsubasa. As World Eagle would be slightly different, but it wouldn't necessarily be super dramatic, as I do think what would be the big change for World Eagle would simply be it becoming a defense type to a more sturdy balance type, as I do think that was the aspect that Tsubasa learned from conquering the dark power. And story-wise, it would still fit, as I do think the premise of it evolving would be completely fine, as it wouldn't really change anything canonically, and Tsubasa would still have his battle with Argo go pretty much the same, with it mostly being a story change for Tsubasa, realizing that he can't fight with World Eagle like he did with Earth Eagle, because it doesn't have the same type of focus, but it is unique, and he'd have to master it to finally defeating Argo in his fight by doing the same thing he would do in his original fight against Argo, as World Eagle would obviously be very scarred up from his battle against Argo and Regil. This would end with, obviously, the same situation, as this would pretty much lead into Tsubasa's story remaining the same, as I don't really think you need to change much after that. It really is just the same, unless you want a full rewrite for Metal Fury. But for Yu's story, this is where I think this could have been a lot more interesting, as for Yu's story, it would pick up pretty much as the story would canonically work when Damien arrives and meets both Tsubasa and Yu for the first time, leading into them being basically destroyed by Damien. It's like kind of messed up when I think about it, because they mostly just show up to make sure their beys work, and then Damien just, ambushes them in like the most hilarious way. But yeah, Libra is completely destroyed. And this would segue into the next part, as we would see the trip after Metal Fury, and effectively we would be a recap of Yu realizing that he is definitely not where he needs to be. And what I mean is, he would recount his experiences during the World Championships about being beaten and ambushed by the Garcias, which left him in a very bad shape. And towards the end of their trip, which I do think they'd spend their training trip in America, it really doesn't make a lot of sense, at least for Tsubasa, because Earth Eagle is based on the Bald Eagle, and I think it being in the U.S. that both Yu and Tsubasa stay in also means that we see a little bit of Masamune before he returns, which is completely fine, I think. He doesn't need to be on screen long. But the point is, before they finish their trip in America, before unbelievably heading back to Japan, they have a final battle, but Masamune does join in, even with, normal Ray Striker. And this leads to a very interesting situation where World Eagle and Ray Striker basically take over the fight, as Yu feels left out, as he tries to get into the battle, but Libra keeps on getting blown away by the force of both beys. As this would at least segue into the next part of that story, as before the trip would end, you would hear Masamune talking to Tsubasa, as both of them are just talking about how good their battle was, with both of them talking about how strong they've gotten, making you feel left out, as he doesn't really feel like he progressed at all, as the training trip was great, but he still feels like he's been left behind by both of his former teammates, as this would segue to Tsubasa being called away by the WBBA, and him believing that Yu would probably come back with him. However, Yu decides and declines this, deciding that it was time for him to go on his own trip, as he still wanted to do some more training. And obviously, since Tsubasa and him have this slightly big brother, little brother relationship, but also friends, he understands and tells him good luck, as he's going back to Japan. This would also segue towards Yu actually doing an interesting trip, going down south, as I believe the Dungeon Gym is in New York. Yu would travel into the southern areas of America, trying to figure out what he needs to do to get stronger, as I do believe this is where Yu reconnects with himself, remembering he is a Bey genius. As most people have kind of forgotten it by the way that he's been treated in the series, Yu is actually a very smart blader and a very good natural, but he needs to bring it out, and I do believe this is where he figures it out. Looking up at the power of the sun itself, he realizes that for Libra to get stronger, he has to excel. And what does Libra do best? it surpasses with the power of its flame fusion wheel, as Yu would decide that he would actually do something unlike the others, as they had natural evolutions. Yu is a genius, realizing how he can make Libra better. And by deciding to finally change up Libra's design, this would make Libra even stronger. So very similar to Blitz Striker, however, Yu is the one who crafts the new Libra. Deciding on how to make it work and how to fix it, he would create it. As we would say hello to the brand new Bey he'd create, that being Promethean Libra. As I do believe that Promethean and Prometheus, focusing on the god of innovation and being creative and quirky, was perfect for a character like Yu, who happens to be a genius by the name of the show. As Promethean Libra is actually a pseudo balance or pseudo defense and stamina type, changing up the strategy that Libra originally had by being mostly just pure stamina. Libra now has the defensive armor to keep up its power and its stamina, as it carries both of those characteristics extremely well, but also changes up a bit of its power. Now, with you utilizing the new abilities of this Libra to effectively take on opponents with more ferocity. As we would also see a bit of his training, as he would learn to master, as he would obviously want to improve, as the one thing he continued to keep from the original Libra was what made Libra so powerful. As we would see him practicing the Infernal Blast, it would be time for him to step it up, as the brand new Libra would finally transcend its new body and its new form by unleashing the new power that would become the final Infernal Blast for you. As I do believe that when we see Yu again, he's obviously very proud of his training, as I do think that this was missed by a lot of the creators, as that you could also have the bladers that were not important challenging other tournaments around the world, as this was done very cleverly, I think, with Ryuga going into, I think it was technically the Mesopotamian area, and even during the Middle East battle for Babylonia, they were also there with Tsubasa, Kenta, and Ryuga. So it's not actually that far-fetched to think Yu, who possibly would end up being in South America anyways, could be traveling his way down, battling the tournaments that happen to be in the NA as well as South American area, which is what I would have him doing. Effectively, possibly even having a clip of him going to Brazil and basically getting his revenge by beating the Garcias. But you can leave it there. But the point is, both of these characters would have proper evolutions for their beys, albeit not being the greatest in terms of having to be significant to the story. You could still make them cool, have their own character growth, which I think was necessary for both Tsubasa and Yu, and showcase to the fans that you still love them. But pretty much that's all I've got for you guys today. This is obviously just showing that the evolutions that they could have had. This isn't really an in-depth rewrite, as it's more so just kind of pinpointing how they could have developed their stories and kind of gone that way. As I do think for a rewrite, there's a lot more details that would have to be changed in order to fit both Tsubasa and Yu into the story better. I do think that this is a perfect culmination, at least for right now, of explaining how their beys could have evolved and how they could have benefited from it. But, like I said, that's all I've got for you guys today. And as always, this is Brad from the Ad Army signing off. And for all of you out there, to sign on.